Welcome to this week's episode of The Follow-Up, where we recap this week's sermon so you can grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. I'm here with Pastors Garet and Bill. Welcome, guys.
Hi, guys. Yeah.
Yay.
Oh, we're glad to be here.
Awesome. We are going to be talking all about the Abraham covenant today. Mm-hmm. So, Garet, you're going to be doing our 60-second recap, right?
Yes, I am.
You got this?
Wow.
Both at the same
You
time.
got this.
Wow.
Thank you.
I'm not saying you got this question mark. I'm saying you got this. Here.
Exclamation point.
Yes.
Okay, let's get going in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so our first point was that our God is an amazingly gracious God. And so what happens there is that God chooses Abraham. And he just chooses him, not because of anything he did, but God just simply chooses him. And we learned that Abraham was actually a sinful guy, that he was an idolater. But despite his sin, that God picks him. He's amazingly gracious. Second point was that God's plan is bigger than just a person or a group. And so from there, we see the three promises, the promises of land, offspring, and then the universal blessing as well. The third point was that Bill, help me out, I can't remember. Third point was
makes covenants.
Yes, God makes unconditional covenants, but still demands a human response. And so God made the covenant happen, but in order to receive the blessing of the covenant, that we need to respond to be a participant in that covenant. And the last one was talking about God's plan for redemption as actually starting and is going through the covenant, that true children of Abraham are ones that have faith. Just like Abraham had faith in God, if we have faith in Jesus,
Finish the sentence.
we will have we will be saved as well. Boom, close.
That was really good. I was impressed.
You were talking so fast.
I know. That was very fast. But you squeezed it in there.
We did. It was close. But the thing is, like me and Bill talked about this,
right,
that there's so much to cover.
Oh, man.
So share a little bit, because there was so much of like, what even direction do you even go with this?
Right. And this is actually good insight, I think, for people to hear, is that as we do these covenants, there's a huge tension for us pastors when we're studying scripture on like, are we doing a sermon right now on Abraham?
Yeah.
Are we doing a sermon on covenants? And then also like, because the nesting dolls, the idea that the covenants fit within each other, like we also have to keep in mind that we're also trying to relate these to all the other covenants in the Bible.
Yep.
And how this all kind of fits together. And so that can be really difficult for us to like figure out where we're going to land on things. And so with the Abrahamic covenant, like we left so much out about who Abraham was. You know, neither one of us really got a chance to talk too much about Isaac or Hagar or
just his time in Egypt and just like his life that he lived and kind of the, like Abraham we talked about is like credited for his faith, but there's some times where he did some stuff where it's like, what are you doing? Like, do not trust God at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely times up until they actually have Isaac where he's really like kind of wavering in like, I believe God and I want to believe God and I say I believe God, but like I'm trying to force also these promises to happen.
Yep.
And I mean, there's so many good lessons in there, aren't there? Like for us, like as we think about our faith, like God promises us things and sometimes we try to force the issue and try to get it for ourselves. And God's like, no, just wait on me, you know? Totally. And so like, there's so many great lessons, but we couldn't cover those lessons because we're really trying to focus in on the covenant and get people to understand this thread of God's salvation happening through all of these covenants, you know?
Yeah. There's so much. And even as we're going into more covenants in the future, there is just going to be so many different things to have to narrow it down. Yeah. You guys are up to the challenge, though. You guys did a great job carrying it out.
Yeah, but like at downtown, like I encourage the people at the downtown campus to like actually read from like Genesis 1 to 22 and look at like everything that's going on. But now read it with the lens of instead of just reading like, oh, I'm just going to read the story, but actually read it like, okay, the covenant is happening now, covenant with Abraham. Like, how does like change my perspective or my understanding of what's going on in the story?
Yep. Yeah, and if you read about covenants from theologians, the key line that they say often is that like the covenants are actually kind of a backbone to Scripture, and so like they help provide that structure and lens for you to view Scripture, and so that is really helpful to read through Scripture now with that new lens.
So now with this new lens, as we're looking into how do we make this more practical, what would you see as a next step for somebody to take after listening and learning about the Abrahamic covenant?
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead personally and double down on kind of what I shared at the Bellevue location this week, in that God, one of the specific things he does is call Abraham out of the land. And it might just seem like God's asking some guy to move, right? But really what you begin to understand as the Bible unfolds is that actually God is calling Abraham out of a certain lifestyle, out of a certain environment, out of a family, out of a culture that all were worshiping idols or worshiping other gods, false gods. And so he's calling him out of idolatry, and he's doing that so that he can make Abraham into a people group who is following Yahweh alone, like that see God as God. And I think there's such a great parallel for us in that when God calls us to Jesus, he's calling you away from something. He's calling you away from the world. He's calling you away from bad environments. He's calling you away from how you used to chase other things. And he's calling you to a new land where you find obedience to Jesus. And in doing that, there's so much blessing. And so that's really, I would say, like, if somebody wants to apply this to their lives, like, look at the ways in which you haven't left that land completely of idolatry, and you need to move into the land of obedience to Jesus and figure out how you can get there, because it's not until we give our lives completely to Jesus where we really see a lot of the fruit and a lot of the blessings that God gives.
Yeah, I think in the kind of charge that I gave to the downtown folks, I think the one that's really been sticking with me is this idea of just simply just like trusting the promises of God. That, like, what does it look like to actually have a faith like Abraham? And we see, like, that we talked about earlier, that this is something that is moving and he's growing in it, and how God promises, like, hey, you're going to have a family, that you're going to have a nation. It's going to be through your blood and through your flesh. But then we see that Abraham, like, trusts that. But then in the next chapter, he goes and he tries to do it by his own way. He tries to do it by his with Hagar. He tries to make his own son, but instead of promising, like, hey, no, actually, you and Sarah are going to have a child, and it's going to be with you and your wife is going to have this child that will bring you a new nation. And eventually, like you said, we see this idea of Abraham's faith kind of come to completion with Isaac, that he was willing to, that God says, like, it's going to be through Isaac, but that eventually Abraham's like, you know what? I know that God's calling me to sacrifice Isaac, and I know it gets picked up in Hebrews that Abraham believed that God would raise Isaac from the dead, that he had so much faith that eventually he's like, okay, I don't know what's going on, I can't see, but I trust God that you are going to work. And just the idea of consistently, just like, there's so many times where it's like, gosh, what's going on? It's so dark, I can't see, I don't know if I can trust you, but I just need to double down, and I trust that who you are, God, and trust that you will fulfill your promises.
Yeah.
Those are both really good reminders. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this week's episode of Follow Up. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Hey, you can probably tell that we have a lot of fun shooting these and doing the follow-up, and we've heard a lot of feedback that people are loving the follow-up as a way to kind of digest the sermon a little bit more. And so if you would like us to keep on doing these things, we always ask that you would like this video, so that just lets us know that you're watching and that you appreciate this. And then also leave us a comment. We would love to know what your thoughts are on the Abrahamic covenant this week.
If you never want to miss a crazy, silly episode of the follow-up, make sure you are subscribed and hit the bell notification button so you get a little notification letting you know when the next episode is out. A little ding.
A little ding. They didn't give me anything to say. And so I am going to do nothing.
Okay.
Ding, ding,
and
ding.
We'll see you next week.